Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Fulsham. With me today is a very wonderful artist, a good friend, creator of Will Not Bow. Welcome to the show, Samantha Branch.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
And joining us, a return guest, creator of Rovers and just finished on Kickstarter, He May Yet Conquer. Mick Beyers, welcome back to the show.
It is always a pleasure to be here.
So yeah, in our continuing series on talking about Kickstarter, chronicling my first campaign here, talking with a bunch of colleagues that have and have not done it before. I know, so just for the audience, Sam and Mick here, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have not worked on the same projects together, right?
No.
Okay, we're all just friends through the internet.
Yeah.
I know last week we had JL and Lindsay from Oneshi Press on the show. They are obviously, linked through multiple avenues. And before that, we had Mr. Abstracto back on the show. He's been working with me on Osrin West #1. But just, wanted to clarify for anybody listening, we have two separate creators, so we'll be getting two different viewpoints instead of, just talking about either my Kickstarter or the various Kickstarters that people have worked on together. So a little bit different perspective. I think it should be fun. I would like, I always like to give the new people, some room to talk about stuff first. So obviously I only have the benefit of, like starting and being over halfway through my first Kickstarter. So, I don't have the insights of multiple campaigns. So first things first, how was your first Kickstarter, Sam? Like, can you just tell us like a little bit about your experiences doing that for the first time?
It was very nerve-wracking. I originally wasn't going to do a Kickstarter at all. I was just going to publish out of pocket, self-publish, and just do conventions and stuff like that. But with encouragement from Mick and Charlie Stickney and Connor Hughes, those guys on Twitch, they kind of helped push me in the direction of Kickstarter. And when I first launched, I was terrified. I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't even know like what to put on my campaign page or anything. But I didn't get funded until like the last week when you get that last rush before the end of the month, when everybody's getting the notifications that, hey, got like 48 hours to back this campaign and stuff. I think that's the time that I got funded for my first campaign, but I also wasn't very active on social media. So it was a little nerve-wracking throughout the month. And I think I was working full-time for another job at the same time. So I was kind of pulled in all kinds of different directions. But overall, I think it was a really great learning experience.
So then, Mick, you Had you done a Kickstarter then before encouraging Sam to go that route?
I don't remember. I was just trying to think if I'd already done mine or not. Mine was November 2018, the first one. Do you remember when yours was, Sam?
I don't. I can probably pull it up, but I think you and I were talking back and forth because it was Charlie, I think mostly that was like, hey, you guys should launch Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
Everything is Charlie's fault.
oh yeah, everything's Charlie's fault. And I think just the two of us launched around the same time.
Yeah, I feel like we crossed over
Hmm.
significantly. I mean, I feel like I pushed Samantha off the edge of a cliff and was like, well, shit, now I have to go too.
That's right. If I go down, you're coming down with me.
We always get warned about, so if if your friends tell you to jump off a bridge, will you do it? You never wonder about the people, who encourage that and then are like, crap, well, now I have to jump too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so then what about you, Mick? Like, was it a long, didn't get funded until the last week kind of thing for you as well?
No, my first one I funded, I think on day 4.
Okay.
I asked for $3,000, funded on day 4. I had a lot of commitment lined up beforehand. Like I knew as soon as I launched, I had over 2,500 like already lined up with family and friends.
Okay.
So I thought I would have funded sooner. I thought they were like, I'd assumed that when I said, hey, I need you to back immediately, they would like back immediately. And then a lot of them were like, oh, I thought I could just fund anytime during the month. It was like, well, no, you can, but like sooner is better.
Right.
And then I managed to pick up enough people I didn't know to cross the line on day 4, which was nice.
So Sam had mentioned oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I don't actually have another point. I just like the sound of my voice.
I was just gonna say, Sam mentioned that she wasn't on social media at all. Had you like created a presence before then?
No, I'm terrible at Twitter and Instagram. Like I was on Twitch and that was it. And like unlike Sam, I wasn't trying to, hold down another job. So I could be on Twitch frequently for it. But my Twitch audience is always, like 2 to 5 people, 3 of whom are bots. Right. So I don't know that.
And one of them's me.
Yeah. One's you, one's Sam, everyone else is a bot.
Yep.
But so like I don't know that being on Twitch was crazy helpful just because my channel there has so little visibility. I was more active on socials for the second one, but again, it wasn't really Twitter or Instagram. It was more Facebook oriented that time.
Yeah, I feel like all of us to a certain extent suffer from the I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is just sort of like what I've seen. It's just like suffering of that sort of like, when's the best time of day for us as creators to actually do the work and be creative versus the time of day when people are on Twitch watching people do things. Like, right. I don't have a ton of like viewers either, and I see artists out there who, in the 50s, 100, 200, people range on average. And the thing that I notice about a lot of those channels is that they're streaming like during and after when I'm eating dinner. But like at that point of the day, like I'm just like run down and tired, and like, sure, I can like get work done and, get pages out, but like, I don't want to have to like deal with like chat and be social at that point in the day, like I have just enough energy to get work done and nothing on top of it by that point. I'm just like, man.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sure there is part of it is like streaming when the audience is available, but also streaming when you're available. And
yeah.
like the times that I've managed to be consistent, I have slowly built up my average. Right. And like there's a ton of factors that go into it that aren't necessarily related to the art, but more the artist. Like
Mhm.
I'm not very engaging as a personality. I mostly just sit and draw quietly and I listen to, either old time radio or soundtracks that aren't like crazy popular or, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like just, not in like the public conscious. Like I'm not listening to new albums. I'm not listening
Yeah.
to current artists. I'm not talking about, current movies, current books, anime, manga. I mean, like if it's not 1950s Americana, I don't really know what it is. And like 1950s Americana audience isn't huge.
Listen,
And
to
besides that,
all of
like,
our listeners out there, take it from me. Come for the arts, stay for Prairie Home Companion.
yeah. And two, like, and I don't know. I don't know how to say this delicately or in a way that
Oh boy.
is
Hot take.
right. But like if Samantha streamed drawing every day in like a bikini top, like I'm sure her viewer count would like shoot up, like in a way that mine wouldn't.
I don't know. I
Because
think a
of,
lot
like,
of people would come to see you in a bikini.
but
Give
like the
yourself more credit.
physicality of the audience, right?
And put a little hot tub gif down on the bottom. Put yourself in
Oh,
the hot
yeah.
tub category.
Right. And it's
Write
like
your
that's
like
not
write people's names
necessarily
on your body for like $5 a pop.
yeah. And like, I mean, they wouldn't be there anymore for my art than they would be for Samantha's art at that point. So
Right,
I feel
yeah.
like that's self-defeating. Like I'm sure, you would pick up someone who's like, oh, I came for the bikini top, but like I stayed for the art. But that's going to be exceedingly rare.
Yeah.
And that's not really like, I don't know.
I've had
Sometimes
similar
I do feel
thoughts.
bad about being like mediocre and having a mediocre channel, but also I do kind of enjoy the mediocrity. Like it gives me space to listen to the dumb stuff I want to listen to and like
Fair.
just sit and stare at my computer and not interact with people, yet still pretend like I am interacting with people.
Yeah, I mean, I've had similar thoughts about, the bikini top thing and I joked about like I'll write, the username, on my body for a donation or whatever. But it's like, again, it's like, while I'm sure there is that sort of voyeuristic audience for, seeing the fat guy shame himself, by, like writing people's names on his stomach or whatever. Like, it feels weird to say this after dealing with like anxiety and depression for so long. I have too much self-respect for that. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's weird to say. But yeah, no, I get that. I get that kind of like, kind of, for lack of a better word, sort of like wallowing in mediocrity on that platform. I just
I
kind
think
of
it. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna throw in there, like for streaming on Twitch and stuff. I think it just comes down to also finding your audience,
Yeah.
because like, yeah, I myself am very introverted as well. So kind of like Mick, I kind of just like to work and listen to music, but I still want to be there for the people watching if they're chatting and stuff. And I think it comes down to also just they help me feel accountable even if they're not chatting in the chat, because they're
Right.
usually working on stuff as well. So it's kind of like you're in a studio space with a bunch
Yeah.
of creators,
Yes.
but without actually having to
Yeah.
be around them, being in your own space.
I feel like that is what I enjoy
Mhm.
most about it, and like what it does most for me is that someone could be watching it anytime, so I do much better about staying on task
Yeah.
than I would with, I'm only there by myself. And too, like that studio aspect, like Connor and I used to dual stream pretty frequently, and like Samantha and I have dual streamed a couple times, and like that kind of bullpen studio feel is amazing, and I love it.
Mhm.
That's 2 points that I have made both on and off. I think this podcast, on my stream, off my stream, just talking with friends, is like the main reason I've streamed, and this is sort of like the how I kind of cope with that like low numbers thing, is like I started to stream to keep myself working. Like
Mhm.
you're showing your
Yeah.
computer screen to people, and like okay, so like yeah, I've expanded my setups and streaming, and I might have a stupid number of monitors for but and I could have my Instagram and shit up on a different monitor that's not like showing, but like you say, like anybody can pop in at any time. There could be people lurking. It makes you want to keep like focused on what you're doing.
Mhm.
And then there's always that like possibility that like you might accidentally show your Facebook profile and dox all of your friends, so it really helps me not uh get locked into
Just
that
wander
doom
off.
scroll.
Yeah.
There's like that aspect of it, and then like you guys have said, like, and I've said it many times to people, it brings back that feeling for me of like when I was getting my degree and like working in the studio with a bunch of like other artists.
Mhm.
It's fun to just know that you're like you have like-minded people doing a similar thing. It's not quite the same because you can't like stretch your legs and walk around the room and like look over
Chat with
other
people.
people's shoulders, and see what
Yeah.
they're doing. But we have Discord servers, and you can post in various chats like what your either a cell phone shot of your notebook or a quick JPEG of what you're working on. So
Mhm. Yeah. I know for Twitch and stuff, if I wasn't streaming, I would not have finished my first issue of Will Not Bow.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like
Like I don't know that I would have finished a comic.
yeah, no, for years I would always be like, oh, I'm writing a story, get 3 pages in and be like, this story sucks. I'm just gonna throw it
Yeah.
out. And same with drawing comic pages. It's like I draw 1 page or 2 pages at
Mhm.
most, and I'm just like, yeah, I think I'll restart this, but like in a
Yeah.
few
Oh, I could do
months.
it better if I only like went back and redid this other thing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
That is actually one thing that I feel very, very privileged and fortunate enough to not have experienced. All of my comic work has been done either in the scope of a independent study in school or via streaming, right? Like I've never really worked on like a big project like that without having been held accountable by something.
Hmm.
And I don't know, but I also am the kind of like creator who's like I am like addicted to finishing things even if they're not good. Like the only time I get a hit of dopamine is like when something's finished and I can be
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay,
No, I
that's
can walk
done,
away from
move on.
anything at any time.
Yeah, there's only been one project I've ever walked away from, and that was a 9 or 10 page Batman comic that I wrote after having a dream about Two-Face. And I was one of those just like, man, the architecture in this is terrible, and like I'm not drawing like the anatomy right in this, and I don't own the character, so I can't profit or really do anything with this anyway. Like why am I wasting my time when I could be like writing and drawing my own shit? That's the only thing I've ever walked away from. Everything else I've finished. Because I
So
have
like
this like strong mentality of like I will learn more by finishing it and doing better next time than I will from stopping and restarting.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
I
as-
sorry, go ahead.
No, you first.
Oh, I was just gonna say, one thing that helps me get through pretty much anything I do is I live through the motto, done and not perfect. It's like
Yeah.
as long as I can finish it, then whatever I'm not happy about for that particular project or whatever, I keep a mental note of that and say, well, that's what I need to work on for the next issue or for the next time I try something similar, like an illustration or whatever. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's what holds a lot of people back, is that it's not perfect. But when is anything ever perfect, especially as an artist, when you're constantly growing and evolving? It's like nothing's ever going to be perfect to you. And where we're our own worst critic as well, is like,
Mhm.
just have it done and not perfect, and just learn from those mistakes.
I like that. You've cut the middleman out of the way I say that. I always say that good is better than perfect, but done is better than good. You cut out the middleman. You're like, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's so true though. Like I have I have a few friends. I would say like a handful, like maybe 3 or 4 friends who are sort of still in that like, oh, I should, stop this and restart it. And I keep saying like, no,
Don't you dare.
don't keep working on that thing and get, get what you can out of like finishing it. It's like part of the thing is like you can't properly, I mean, there's a few things you can critique by like not going the full way on something. Like if you're, you know, looking at your sketches or something and start to realize like, man, even in my sketch phase, I'm really just focusing on contours and not like, you know, shading in volume of a figure or something for like really figuring out anatomy. But like, you can't really critique how well you're doing if you don't have a finished product to look at, like the end result,
Yeah.
so much changes from like the first few lines you put down on a page to like the end picture that you end up with. It's like you actually, at least in my opinion, you grow so much more by finishing something and looking at it and being like, okay, look, these are the 3 things that are the worst in this picture. These are like 3 things that are actually pretty good. Let me work on all 6 of these things and make them all better,
Yeah.
So thinking of like finishing things and getting better, and this is something I'm really interested in like hearing about, since I'll be doing another Kickstarter eventually. What did you guys learn with the first one that you applied to your second campaign?
Um,
I knew I wanted to go smaller. Like I knew I wanted to. I offered too much, and not offered too much. I wanted to offer too much, and I set my stretch goals too close together. And my stretch goals were dumb because it wasn't even things I wanted, so I couldn't realistically expect my audience to want them either. Um, I changed my mind partway through the Kickstarter. Was like, no, this is gonna be in color. So like, I ended up spending much more than I originally planned on. Whereas if I just said color from the get go, like I think it would have been more successful if it had always been in color instead of right at the end being like, oh wait, but I am gonna do it in color, guys. So I knew for the second one, I wasn't gonna have as many stretch goals. I wasn't planning on having any stretch goals for the second one. I wasn't gonna do color, and I knew I wanted to set my funding goal much, much smaller because it had been so long since the first Kickstarter. The second Kickstarter wasn't really related to the first Kickstarter. And I, didn't have much of a social media presence. The first time I had even less of a social media presence the second time. And I had a different kind of social media presence, I guess, the second time. And so I didn't want to set the bar, anywhere remotely out of reach.
yeah.
What about, I was gonna say, what about you, Sam? Like what sort of things had you learned through your first campaign that you applied to the second?
Well, just the experience of launching a Kickstarter was a big learning experience alone. But I feel like I didn't put in the work for my next Kickstarter that I was supposed to after seeing how my first Kickstarter ended up going. Because I originally launched, like, my very first Kickstarter was for issue 2 of my comic. And then when I launched it for issue 3, I actually did not get funded. My Kickstarter failed. It didn't reach enough audience, and I thought I was doing a lot better. I was pretty much doing the same thing I did for my first one, but it wasn't reaching enough people, and I set the goal too high for my lack of presence online, I guess. And so with it failing, that alone taught me that audience is everything. Like, you
Right.
can't sell something if somebody doesn't know about it, right? So that's when I focused on my email list. I focused on uploading on social media more. I made sure that the comic was like completely finished so that when the Kickstarter was done, I sent it off to the printer and I don't have to worry about waiting on colors or art from anybody else and stuff like that. So
Right.
I was very prepared for when I relaunched the Kickstarter for issue 3, both with my content and with my social media and audience.
Well, that's like, I was thinking about running my second one around the time Sam launched her second one, and then yours not funding was like, ooh, nope, I don't want to do that. So like, I didn't end up doing a Kickstarter again for, another 2.5 years. And when I did, it was completely different. Like, because I felt like Sam and I were very similar in our size, our scope, our ability, all of it. And like, if it didn't work for Sam, it's definitely not going to work for me. Like,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had some like similar like feelings, right? Of like looking at the most recent Oneshi Press Kickstarter, one that I actually did, I think like 8 pages of inks for. But and it's something we didn't get around to talking about last week, but I was pretty worried, like they've done half a dozen, 7, 8, I forget exactly the number of successful Kickstarters. They said it was like 7, I think, successful Kickstarters, and the most recent one took up until like that last week to get funded. And I was like, oh man, oh no, oh no. Like, they have a built-in audience, and they have like, this isn't like the first issue of something. And like, I know there's like maybe that little bit of an uptick for an issue 1, because like you have people who are like, ooh, like, what is this? And then
Yeah.
some people will like it and come back, some people won't like it and won't come back. I mean, that's just the nature of issue 1s, but like, I mean, granted, their goal was like 5 times what I'm trying to raise for this, but like, they have at least 5 times the audience that as I do, or at least it seems that way. I think they easily have 5 times the engagement that I do. But yeah, it was just sort of like, oh no, like, if this like established, group of creators is like not getting funded until the last week, like, oh god, like, I have like all of the prediction algorithms that I had was like, input your mailing list, input your Instagram and Facebook, like all those numbers, and it was like, yeah, you could expect like 30 people maybe to back your campaign. And I was like, oh god, like,
I feel like timing is key. That was one thing that Charlie told me when I launched my first Kickstarter, is like, don't launch around holidays or big events. But also, one thing I've tried to keep in mind as well is just like world events, like what's going on. So like my Kickstarter for issue 3, I launched like right around when COVID was starting. And I was a little worried about that one, because like, well, people are losing their jobs, and things are a little strained right now. I don't know what shipping is going to be like and stuff like that. And then same
Right.
with issue 4 just now. It's like things are finally starting to loosen up and everything. But with things loosening up, like launching during the summer, it's kind of risky because that's when the tourist season booms. So everybody's spending
Right.
their money elsewhere. For the holidays, it's like, well, Christmas, there's parties, there's celebrations, there's gift buying, things like that. And I feel like um that's one good thing to take into consideration when launching a campaign is just like what's going on around you outside of your bubble that could affect
Right.
traffic and
See,
backers.
that's interesting because I actually now I think I asked both of you before, and I think both of you have said no, that neither of you have done the comics launch course. Is that
No,
correct?
Yeah.
I've taken a few workshops, like those free online workshops and
Mm.
stuff, but haven't taken the course yet.
So like one thing you get when you pay to like actually take the classes is a like you get invited to a private Facebook group, you know, to ask questions and like get support from people. And one thing I actually asked recently is like because I was and I'm still planning on doing an 84 page noir thing, and I want it to be done by December 1st.
Mm.
Because I'm, you know, I hate myself and want to do like 2 pages a day, which I've done multiple times, but you know, it's still a lot of work. Um, it's one of those things like last year, 2020, for October's, like, you know, Inktober, Arttober, all those things. I was like, I'm gonna do a whole issue this month because I had never done that before. Like all of my previous issues were like a day for pencils, a day for inks, a day for colors, and it's like 3 months to get a single, you know, normal floppy issue out. And I was like, I can't be like working for DC or Marvel and like have that kind of a page rate. You know, you have to get like a issue a month. So I was like, I'm gonna do an issue a month. Um, and that really like boosted like my speed and my page count. And now like I could easily do pencils and an ink in a day, like both easily. I can do that. And most of the time I'm doing like a page and a half to 2 pages a day.
Crazy person.
I know. But yeah, so this year I'm trying to do an entire graphic novel in 2 months because why not? Let's just see what I can do, right? It's not like I am working for like DC or Marvel yet. It doesn't have to be the best stuff I've ever done. I just want to see if I can do it. But I was one of the questions I had asked the group was like, what is like holiday you know, campaigns like? Because if I finish it in the beginning of December, I'd probably be running my Kickstarter in December, right?
Yeah.
And the information I got was basically like if you do enough legwork ahead of time, prime your audience well enough ahead of time, like it should be okay regardless of what time of year
That makes sense.
you
Yeah.
launch.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking like I think it clicked a little more when you were talking about it, is like there's always something going on, right? Whether it's a big world
Hmm.
event or a holiday. Like, so say you don't launch around holidays. Well, when does that start, right? Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like
Hmm.
late November goes all the way until what, February, because people are tapped out after the holidays too. And then it's like, okay, well then I can launch in like February, March, April, but then as soon as like May starts hitting and the warmer weather is around, like then all of the summer is out because people are outside doing stuff in the summer. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
think
We
it
were
I think it depends too, like how quick you can fulfill a campaign and how quick you
true.
can get like new stuff out because like I don't know, I find for me it personally it takes a few months to fulfill a campaign and I don't like the idea of like launching another campaign while
Hmm.
I have people waiting for stuff
True.
from a previous campaign because it's like, well, where's the trust? It's like when am I getting this package? Why would I back this one? Like
Right.
and
Right.
and so like I think launching around those times like in February then you have kind of the beginning of spring to fulfill those orders and get them out, and then maybe throughout the summer kind of promote the next project and then launch like in the fall or whatever. But I mean, it all depends on your audience too, I think, and what your activity is online. And I think
like
if you,
your track record too, right? Like
yeah,
even if it has taken you a little bit of time, as long as you have delivered everything that you say you're going to deliver, I
yeah,
think over time you'll build up trust with like your repeat customers of like, oh yeah, it may have taken 2 or 3 months or half a year or whatever, before I got that package, but I did get the package
it's
and
like I
everything
actually
that I
got
got
it.
was there.
Yeah. I think
So I
part of
know
it
they're
is
good
that like
for it.
you're not just creating your own book, you're creating your own audience. And like your
Right.
audience is going to be, I guess if you build your audience, in a certain way, like your audience is going to be loyal to you, not to your creation. So like if you're DC or Marvel, like 9 people out of 10 don't care about you, they care about the character. So as long as the character is out on time, that's what they want.
Yeah.
But with a indie on Kickstarter, it's like, oh, Folsham is doing this thing, Samantha Branch is doing this thing, I'm there for them and for that. And you've got a lot more leeway. Like,
Right.
Holidays don't matter because they've got kind of in the back of their mind, oh, it's like, oh, it's a Folsom or Samantha Branch thing. Like, I've already spent that money in my mind. I've already budgeted it in some way.
Been following it for so many months, like I've expected this now. So
Right. So then it's like it's not an issue for them to back or support whenever. And right, like I guess it's
goal,
the
right?
idea that like the brand you're building is yourself, not the franchise.
Right.
Yeah.
Like my two things are in no way connected to each other. One was built on a pre-existing IP, so it's like I was even kind of trading on that brand recognition more than oh, it's a new Mick Beyers thing, because no one outside of my 5-person Twitch audience knows who I am. And so building on
them are right here.
yeah. And so building on that, like that did more for me in the long run than like, oh, it's a superhero thing, or it's a mystery thing, or it's a sci-fi thing. Like, no, it's like it's a recognizable creation from an older creator. Luckily, it's in the public domain, so I can ride his incredibly long coattails into success. And through that process, I've picked people up who've told me, like, I will back your next thing, irregardless of what it is, which is like the audience you're after. Like, you're customizing that audience, not just the book.
Yeah, because a lot of people, that's what turns them away from Kickstarters or just crowdfunding in general, is like they've either had experiences or heard horror stories of these creators not delivering and just ghosting them and just running off with their money. Like, I've talked to a few people that are just like, oh, well, like I backed this thing several years ago and I wasn't going to get it unless I gave them more money. And I mean, I've even backed a project like that as well, where it's like, I backed this desk that folds down, but it sits in your lap and stuff, so that it was great for traveling. Because at that time I was living in the RV full time and traveling. But I wasn't going to get the desk because they hit some snags, and they're like, well, unless every person that wants their desk gives us an extra like 40 or 60 bucks, you're not going to get your desk. So then you either pay the 40 or 60 dollars or miss out on a $400 desk. And so it's like, well, we'll pay it up, but I'm definitely not backing anything from you again, because like you can't be trusted, and you like you don't really know what you're doing. And so I think that turns a lot of people away. So as long as you're not asking for extra money at the end, and kind of just like, it's like, okay, I messed up and I'll pay out of pocket, but I know better for next time of how much I need to raise in order to cover these costs. and then actually deliver the project, because otherwise it's like, good luck trying to get those people to come back ever again. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to like take this on to like too weird of a tangent, but like that in and of itself is like really like I read an article or saw like a YouTube video from one of those more science focused channels that I watch a lot. It was like maybe a year ago, but it's talking about how like anxiety is like a survival mechanism,
mm,
to like constantly be like, you know, hyper vigilant and stuff is like a survival thing. And a lot of what you said is something that like I thought about before I launched this Kickstarter, even before I took the comics launch course. And I was like, yeah, no, I have to have my book finished, at least the main story. Like I have to have that done because like I don't want to risk not delivering.
mhm,
Another thing that I did was like I made sure that every single tier that, you know, every pledge level that I had um includes enough money to produce, pack, and ship that specific tier, you know.
yeah,
And it's just like, so like no matter what, I'll have enough money plus a little extra, right?
yeah,
And
Yeah.
then I'm just like, just so much anxiety around like the not fulfilling of a Kickstarter that I'm like, I had like inbuilt things to make sure that it is a success. You know, there's obviously things that are out of my control, like if for whatever reason the printer I chose decides to like not fulfill it for whatever reason, or if they're like, you know, print shop burns to the ground, or you know, whatever, knock on wood that that doesn't happen. But like, you know, there are steps in the chain that I don't control, but everything that I can control, like I'm like on top of it, you know.
yeah. And that's the key too, is like just staying up to date with your audience and letting them know what's going on, just to be like, okay, I've done everything in my power. And I think it might have been my first campaign, but I went with a print company down in Florida, and then a big
Mhm.
hurricane came through at that moment when it was ending, and I sent off my order, and they're just like, well, we're closing up shop and evacuating for a few days, and then we'll come back and see what the damage is and stuff. So it's like,
Right.
well, crap, that's going to probably put me back like at least a few weeks, because it's shipping up to Canada. Like,
Yeah.
so with
I
customs and
might be
everything.
using
So
the same people you used because the people I'm using are in Florida.
yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, you're
But I
using,
have
I think, the
worked with
same
them
person, but
before,
yeah.
and I've always had great results and really good communication with them. So
Hmm. Yeah, and the new
I
people
don't
I'm with
think
right
it's really
now,
easy.
like with COVID and everything, they're like short staffed and stuff. So it's like, well, they have an
Mhm.
estimated date of when it'll get done. So I'll keep an eye on the progress of the order itself. But if it gets delayed, then I'll that's out of my control. Like the order has been
Right.
placed, like I'm waiting on them now. So like as long as you let your backers know what's going on and stuff, then they'll feel like they're a part of the process still, and that
Yeah.
you're not just, you got to trust me with this, like I'll get it to you eventually.
I feel like I'm almost over like over communicating with the backers. Like I've seen like people do successful campaigns, you know, that last about a month and they've only updated the thing like 3 times. And I think I've updated my backers like 6 times, 7 times already, and I still have like just under 2 weeks left to go. Like I was like, how much communication is too much communication, you
I think
know?
when if you have like a lot of things to celebrate, like whether you got funded or reaching stretch goals, and like I've seen some of your updates, like you're getting close to reaching certain stretch goals and stuff. I think those are great things to communicate, because they want to celebrate with you. They're backing your project to support you and support the project. So celebrating those little milestones, I think, is really great for them to see it, just to be like, you're, and to show how passionate and excited you are about it
Yeah.
too. I
I think
think
it
like
kind of
keeps them excited.
comes back to that idea of customizing your audience. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you establish, kind of like a precedent or personality of sharing or oversharing if you feel like it is, but like that's what they'll come to expect. Like,
true.
I know this Kickstarter over here, like they hardly ever update, but Foul won't shut up. And every day I open my inbox, there's something there. But then like they'll go to their inbox one day and there won't be something there. And they'll be like, oh shit, is this falling apart now? Like, what's happened? Why isn't this going well? Like, it's just whatever you establish, like
usually
make
no
sure
news
you
is good news.
stick with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No news is good news, but backers want to hear the good news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And like I kind of feel like for my end, I don't feel like I have a good I haven't found my self-hype voice yet. And whenever I send out an update, I feel like tonally I'm all over the place and I try to cover up, my crushing insecurities by just using all the exclamation points ever. And it's like, but if everything ends in an exclamation point, then nothing is, standing out. And so it's a struggle for me to like.
That's when you add bold and italics to.
Yeah, right. Like I just got to keep up in the ante.
Yeah, capitals and then header sized font.
Yeah, and just like trying to find that balance between what to share, when to share, how to share, and like that. It for me is the toughest part of the Kickstarter. It's like building the page is kind of fun. Seeing it come together is kind of fun. Watching that number tick up is kind of fun. Every time I need to send out an update or talk to the audience directly, it's like I don't want to sound like
it's so stressful.
I'm desperate for your approval. I don't want to sound like, this is just fuck it. I don't care about you guys either. Like I don't know how I want to sound.
I never know how to word my how thankful I am for the support, because even like to this day, and I don't think it'll ever go away, I'm just surprised that people even care at all about the project. Right? And so I'm like, how do I not sound like a blubbery mess but still convey that tone of like I am extremely thankful for everything.
Right. I feel like I should just start up. It's like, listen, my family doesn't love me, but you guys do, and that's all I need.
Oh, I think we all feel that so much, because I mean that is like the biggest realization that I have like had to face in this process so far, was like just how true it really is for everything, seeing the difference between the vocal minority and the silent majority, right?
Right.
I didn't know, because I've like had people checking my Kickstarter and coming to me with updates that I haven't even like known yet, because I don't sit there refreshing the page every 15 minutes.
And like I'm desperate for feedback. Like I constantly want to know what other people are thinking about it. It's like, what do you want to see? What do you like? What do you not like? And it's like, I never get any response back. On the He May Yet Conquer Kickstarter, like I constantly got people talking. They're like, hey, is this print going to be available in a boobs version? And we're like, hey, listen, with the boobs version of the book, what are we going to look at? Like, hey, I'm getting the boobs version of the book. Like, how soon am I going to get those boobs? And like,
yeah, where's my boobs?
Yeah, where are the boobs at?
Hey, Mick, I need my boobs.
And it's like, boobs. I mean, I knew boobs would sell, but like, even still, I was shocked at how like.
Look, I'm not ashamed to admit that you gave me the option of boobs or no boobs.
Is for boobs. I mean, it's just like all the regular books, like on Rovers or the regular version of this book, like no one cares. Like, yeah, whatever. The book is going to show up when the book is going to show up. I'm not worried about it. But like, with this boobs version, they're like, hey, listen, I need an update. on these boobs. Like, I like
You
boobs.
know that Mick put a lot of extra work and attention into the
Yeah.
boobs
Oh,
version of the book.
Yeah.
I was
Which is
there.
why I
saw
messed
him
that
do it
version
on-
of the book up.
I saw him doing the non-boobs version on stream. It's like, whatever. I gotta get this stuff done so I can get to the boobs.
The
Yeah.
boobs.
Yeah, I'm gonna be streaming the next book on Picardo because I'm just all boobs all the time.
Make sure to share those links.
Well, I think like part of it was like, you give me the option of a boobs comic or a non-boobs comic. I'm gonna go with the boobs. But I think like on one of your streams, because I wasn't familiar with Burroughs at all before seeing your stuff, and and I think you mentioned that it's like actually part of the lore, right? That like
Yeah.
that's just how like it is
Yeah.
in the original stuff anyway. And so I was like, oh well, like yeah, doubly so then. If that's like what it's all being drawn from anyway, that seems like the more authentic version of this to begin with. So
Mhm.
cool. I get to support, the actual creative vision, and I get some boobs.
It's a win-win.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a win-win. Can't lose.
Yeah, I didn't care about the lore. I just wanted
Just
to.
want the boobs. That's why I'm having
Uh.
Samantha Branch do a boobs cover for me on the next book.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
And that's something that I have neglected since school. It's like I don't draw a lot of boobs these days. I mean, I draw boobs, but they're under clothes.
Me too. And I'm wondering like what is wrong with me and why have I not, gone in the other direction yet? But
My social awkwardness has a lot to
Yeah.
play into it for me. I felt
almost have to create like an alter personality
Yeah,
or whatever online,
yeah,
like a whole
right.
other account.
Well, it's not so much that for me, but like it's just like I don't know. I got nothing against, strip clubs or anything, but I'm not a strip club guy unless they have good chicken wings. And I just felt so out of place and really, really awkward in those like figure studies classes when there was a naked person in the room, guy or girl, didn't matter, young or old. It was just very weird, just very odd feeling. And
I think it's just because like growing up, that's how we're toned to think of a naked body is just like, oh, you should be ashamed that you're looking at it. Oh, you should be ashamed that you're even showing it. Like,
right.
Yeah.
I heard Sister Mary Jones in my back of my head smacking that ruler. Like, you're sinning, boy. Go to burning hell. I'm like, no, but they're making me. It's for a grade, I swear.
I'm paying to be here. They're making me do it.
Paying with singles. Oh man. But yeah, no, it really is interesting to see how people come out of the woodworks when you're doing something like this. Like I've given away free comics before that haven't had this kind of traction with the audience that I was bringing to Kickstarter, right? Like
Right?
don't even count like the natural sort of discovery that the website has like natively to the platform, but like there's just people in my Twitch audience or like on my Facebook, whatever, like wherever they are, that still haven't read like the noir comic I did last year, which is free, on my website, folshamart.com/btb, or the, free shit that I give away, as signing on to the newsletter or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But like,
I mean, like, full transparency. I back a lot of comics on Kickstarter. I get most of them digitally, of which I read almost zero. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't read the comics I get. Like, even a lot of the comics I've received physically in person, like, I don't read them. I mean, like, Samantha Branch, Charlie Stickney, and Clay Adams, like, as soon as I get those boxes open, I read those books. Like,
right.
but I have a personal connection to those three creators. And
Right.
like, if I don't have that personal connection and I bought it because I was interested in art or interested in the story or interested in whatever, then it's like, I'll get to it eventually. And like, I have a long box dedicated to my Kickstarter collection. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to read these front to back someday. It's like, I haven't opened that box except to put new comics in a long time. And it's like, I want people to read my book, obviously, but I'm pretty confident it's going to be like, I think 60 to 70 like digital backers only on this collection. And it's like, none of them have ever messaged me about anything. You know, I'm sure at least 10 of them have downloaded the comic. One of them may have even opened the PDF. I don't know if they read the comic once the PDF was open.
I definitely read it.
Thank you. But like, I
was
remember,
like, how's this big ass alien gonna fit through that tiny crag in a mountain? Just to prove that I actually read
it. It's like, right, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like a moving the goalpost kind of a thing, where it's like, you know, at first I want people to watch me draw to know that they love me. It's like, oh, now I want people to buy my book so I know that they love me. It's like, oh, now I want them to actually read my book so I know that they love me. But then I need them to message me that they've read my book so that I know that they love me. And like, you know, you keep setting up these goalposts to prove that people love you. And like with this Kickstarter, it was like, you know what? The more digital orders, the better, because no one has to read it. I still get their money. I don't have to send anything out. Like digital orders are where it's at. And it's like, I do still, you know, crave some of that response for the attention, but also like, you know what? If you all want digital orders, that's fine. I don't care how you look at your boobs or don't look at your boobs. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I personally really enjoy the digital options when it comes to Kickstarters, because I mean, I don't have a whole lot of space to be collecting a bunch of comics, and I prefer to have the digital version for now until, you know, maybe they come out with like a full volume or full graphic novel, whatever it is that they plan to do for like their future endeavors. But when it comes to like my own campaign, I do enjoy offering like the digital versions, because like you said, Mick, it's so much easier to just like send it out. You don't have to worry about like shipping, delays in, you know, customs or anything like that. It comes at no extra cost really. And but I know I really love the process of packaging up the orders and sending them out, and I get more comments about how I package my orders versus the book itself.
Yeah,
right? Like I get messages of being like, oh my god, like I had a whole experience just opening the package, and I'm like, well, did you read the book?
Because like that first one was like in the tissue paper with the wax seal and the string. It was gorgeous. I mean, I didn't want to open it so that, you know, it would be destroyed, but you know, I had to read the book, so I think someone had messaged me at one point too. They're like, oh my god, I've had this letter opener that's like shaped like a little sword or something for like the longest time, and I finally got to use it, and I felt like I was like in medieval times opening up like an old letter or something. And it's like, that's awesome. Now what do you think of the book? Like
Man,
yeah, that's great. I'm glad you had a good time. Tell me about the book.
I for the longest time have wanted to get a personalized metal like wax sealing stamp, and like the wax and like, you know, all that stuff, but I just haven't had a reason to do it. But now you may be convincing me that I should actually do that. Oh man, but that was actually something we talked about last week with Oneshi Press, is like packaging it up and having like a full experience, like unboxing things, and like I got no idea like what I'm gonna do on that end, because I don't know. I think for me it's one of these things, like I also get a lot of my stuff digitally, you know. Like I was reminded you know, when Mick, when you were saying, you know, you open up the long box just to put comics in it, you know, it really reminded me of like when I finally broke down and I was like, fuck it, and I sold all of my comics with the exception of like a handful of trades and like graphic novels. Like every single issue I used to own is no longer, like, I don't have them anymore because I was like, what am I doing with them? They're in boxes under my bed. I don't pull them out to look at them. I don't reread them. Like, they're not like, action number 1 from 1938 that's worth $25 million or whatever it's up to these days,
Yeah.
and it's like, they're never going to be worth anything anyway. Why am I holding on to them? And I don't begrudge people who like to collect things. Like, if you like to collect things, cool, more power to you. I've just never been a very sentimental person who needs to hold on to stuff, like, I have so many times tried to force my parents to get rid of stuff for me because they're like, what do you want to do with this, like, art like the what are those things called, those big folders, profile
Oh, the portfolios.
Yeah, that's the word. Like, what do you want to do with this big portfolio suitcase of artwork from your high school art class? I was like, I don't know, burn it. Like, what do you want? Like, I'm never gonna use it again.
Oh
Like, I'm
man,
never
that's
gonna
one
look at
thing,
this
like, my
again.
parents would my parents would never ask me what to do with that. They would be like, I'll be like, oh yeah, I don't like this. And sometimes they've seen me like tear out pages out of my sketchbook and throw them out. And like, my dad too, he would look at me, he's like, don't throw out anything. He's like, even if you take a bad picture, it was like, don't throw it out. Stuff like that. And it's like, you want to keep those for like memory's sake and to look back on and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay. So ever since then, I'm just like, anything art related, I'm like, here's a tote, mom and dad, keep it in your basement. I don't want it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I keep my digital files because, like, I can store a hard drive that's full like way easier than, reams and reams of paper and, like wooden stretched canvases that are like, an inch and a half thick for one picture. I'm just like, like, what am I ever gonna do with it? And I have come to a point now where, like, I do see the merit of having some of that stuff around because, like,
Mhm.
I have gotten to a point in, having an audience where people are like not necessarily asking me to see the old stuff, but like, I see people in places in their own art journey and they get down on themselves for like not being like amazing or whatever. And I have to, I have that opportunity now, because I have, 4 people watching me on the internet, where I can at least reach out to those few people and be like, well, look, here's something that I did, back in 2016 or whatever, like my first comic that's on DeviantArt somewhere, and I'm not going to tell people where it is. They can find it. Good on them. But it's terrifying. Like, it's so bad. Like, the art is so bad, but it's on DeviantArt. I know where it is, and I can like always go and like show people. One thing I don't have, like I've said, is like I don't have like old sketchbooks that I can like flip through and stuff. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like I have enough old shit digitally that like I don't really need it either. But
I have a crate in the garage, like a Rubbermaid tub, just full of shit for years and years and years and years. Because like I'll just throw it in there, and it's like originally I was keeping. It's like, I like this idea. I want to follow up on this someday. Like, what if I run out of ideas? And it's like, I never run out of ideas. I always come up with new stuff to do, which is why I like everything starts as a side project. But then, like, the last time I went to the tub, it's like I've used a lot of this stuff just in different places. And it's like, I probably don't need to keep this tub around anymore. It has like the first comic I ever drew in there, but I didn't have comic pages and I didn't know how to get comic pages. So like I just drew it in a sketchbook, like 2 or 3 panels to a page, and it's like eventually I put it in Photoshop and like mashed it into a comic shape. But like it's in there, and it's like, oh yeah, I definitely want to get back to that idea. And like I've been saying that for literally 2 decades now. And it's like, I do not know if I'm getting back to that idea. Like that idea may never happen, but I still have it in there, and I still tell myself it'll happen someday.
I mean, if you allow me like to stroke your ego just a little bit more, I have mentioned to people in the past of just how amazed I am at how prolific you are, because it's like almost every time I tune into your stream, and it, sometimes it's like a week later, sometimes it's maybe a month and a half later, because you often stream in the morning when I'm sleeping. But like I feel like every time I tune in, you're working on something new, and then I
Yeah,
ask,
what's
like,
up with that?
and then I ask, like, what happened to the old thing? You're like, oh yeah, I finished that. It's not that you just stopped working. It's like you
What the hell?
finished it, and I'm like, how do you? It's not like, I mean, I can grasp the concept of the pages and like drawing the pages and getting that done, because I'm a rather fast artist myself, but like, where do you, like, when do you write this stuff? Like that part for me takes forever. Like writing is like so difficult for me.
That's funny because I'm like the opposite. Writing is the quick part for me, and then drawing is the slow part for me. I don't know why. Like I focus on a lot of details and stuff. But when I
Your
write,
artwork
I
is
try
very
to
detailed.
plan out the whole story in point form, and then I just go through that list and like write out the story. Like
See, I do that too, but that's what takes a long time for me. It's like, I like right now, right, is I'm working on the Osrin Tales, taking the 3 issues, which are available as an add-on on my Kickstarter, but I will say it's not canon anymore to those characters in the story. Like the bard's name has to change. Like I called her Aziza, but I came up with another character, and I really like the name Isabel, but Izzy for short. And having 2 female characters with Z's in their names is very confusing, even to me. And I'm like, no, we have to change the bard, even though she was created first. I like the cleric a lot better as a character. She's actually now the main character of the book, and I'm like, no, like, okay, we have to change the bard's name. Also, in the graphic novel series I'm writing, which, and I hate this, pains me to say this, but literally like 2 weeks ago I figured out how to solve a really hard story problem that I was having, and I might be adding 10 issues to do it, which is taking a 40 issue comic to a 50 issue comic, because I'm insane. But yeah,
just a bit.
it's just like, I don't know. I plotted out what it was originally supposed to be 4 10-issue books. I plotted like everything out for the most part, like the big sweeping kind of, arcs. And then like as I like narrow my focus down, and like I'm like, okay, you know, cleric's personal story has to do like these 5 major beats, and then like the warrior and our artificer, like wizard tinker guy, and our bard character, right, and like then the villains, right, and they all have to hit like certain story beats. How do I puzzle them together? How do I make sure that if I mention something in the beginning it pays off at the end? Like where do these plot threads like drop off to like be picked up in book 2, like all of that stuff is just like, and maybe it's my hypervigilance or like the anxieties of like wanting to make sure that it's airtight, but like that's the part for me that's like very difficult. But once it's done, then I can draw pages and just be confident that like I'm doing the right thing. It's just like, nope, okay, draw, done. So yeah, I don't know. Is that sort of like, are you just better at, well, maybe not better, but are you just more comfortable doing
No,
like
I
that
think
part?
better is the right word.
Yeah,
I like better.
Yeah, maybe better.
Yeah, better
But
is
like,
good.
yeah, are you just better at that than me, or like?
I mean, like with He May Yet Conquer, like I knew how I wanted it to start, and
the
like,
characters were already kind of there and stuff. Like
yeah, like I did not plan on making it an issue. Like I'd been working on this other thing. I thought like, oh hey, this is kind of a neat style. I want to try and like use this. Can I use this as a style? It would not fit for this project. So like I've always had this other story in mind. I'll just do the first couple pages of that to see if I can figure this out. And then I'll come back to this. And then like I got through those initial pages and it was like, oh, but then on the next page I can do this. So like that one, like I wrote as I went and it just, happened page by page. And like at some point, I figured out like how I wanted it to end and what some of the story beats would be. And like a lot of it, like that book is just like a walk and talk. Like it's two people walking through a landscape, talking about stuff. Occasionally things happen. So it's not a very complex, convoluted
Right.
story to begin with. But like that, He May Yet Conquer, the first issue of Hollow, the issues of Rovers, they all happened in that very similar way where it's like I knew either how I wanted it to start, how I wanted it to end. Like I knew an important moment that I wanted to happen, and then it was figuring out how to get there and then what the payoff after that would be. And
Right.
a lot of those issues are just like, all right, I'm going to sit down and draw today. I want to draw this today. So that's what I drew. How can I make it fit in the story? And that's kind of how it happened.
So that's your secret of being so fast. You don't write things.
But so like the
No,
stuff
I'm gonna
that
start drawing and see what happens.
the stuff I do write, like that's the stuff that, is stuck in limbo forever because, I'm trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, this part doesn't make sense. Like, but I need to lead up to this thing. And so like those times I get bogged down and when projects get shelved, it's usually because I am trying to write the whole thing before I ever start drawing and get the whole thing kind of nailed down. And then those times when those projects have finally made it to the page, I deviate almost immediately because as I'm putting pictures on the page, it's like, but this doesn't make sense in this context, or I've already done this previously. Like I wrote a story called Weirdly that was supposed to be like a riff on like 50s detective suspense monster movies kind of a thing. And I wrote out the script for it, but then when I was drawing it, it's like it's the same conversation in happening 4 to 5 times with different people each time, but it's always the same conversation. Like the story isn't actually progressing, or like these characters are going places, but the story is going nowhere. And like I completed a version of it and put it up on Webtoon, and like it is legitimately awful because I also tried like inking for the first time ever, and like I absolutely hate everything about it. But like the times I struggle, it's when I try to go against my natural inclination of just draw and write at the same time. When I try to separate those processes, that's when things fall apart for me. And I get stuck. They go in circles. They stop progressing. I'll get more caught up in like, well, let me try using this brush and maybe that'll work. And it just, goes nowhere.
So, like you mentioned something that I think is afflicting the noir thing that I'm doing right now, which also a lot of parallels between this book that I'm working on and the stuff that you've done. Partly is it's a public domain work that I'm doing, and I think you might be familiar with this actually, Mick. I don't know, because I know you and I like we lap over with like the noir stuff. Have you seen the movie DOA, Dead on Arrival, from like 1949? Like an old noir movie.
Hold on, let me look it up.
It's about a guy who gets poisoned and then has to solve his own murder before he dies. And I literally like when writing this graphic novel, the first step that I did was watch the movie, obviously, and then the second time I watched the movie, I wrote down every single piece of dialogue in the movie and who said it. And there's a lot of conversations between the protagonist and the love interest where it's like fucking 5 to 6 lines of dialogue of like, why did you like leave on this trip so suddenly, and like I'm angry that you're not here, and like, but I also miss you and I'm concerned for you. And then like the protagonist is like, is this why you called me? And then the love interest is also his secretary. It's like, well, no, like this person also called the office and it happens to be a clue for like this mystery that I don't know is going on. And I like every time I sit down to like edit those things out, I'm like, well, if I edit these things out, I'm not building up to this payoff at the end where like the love interest comes to actually confront the protagonist in person rather than just being on the phone the whole time. And I'm just like, but it feels like the same conversation, like over and over again. But I also
over and over
like
again, yeah.
It's so weird, like, and I was telling this to my dad the other day when I was talking to him about the project, because I don't have any IRL friends anymore, and he's the only person who listens to me blather on about this shit, other than the poor rubes that I rope into coming on this show. But like, yeah, he's like, well, like in Hollywood, they have script editors and they kind of rewrite and write and rewrite these things until they're a really tight script. I was like, yeah, I know. So this doesn't change the fact that it seems repetitive. And it's like, why? And we like treading the same ground over and over again. But again, like every time I try and cut that crap out, like I can't.
Yeah, then like what happens? Like what is going on if you cut all of that stuff out?
Right, like you get none of the emotional payoff between those two characters,
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess like part of noir genre stuff too is that it does sort of like, it's a heightened version of reality, but it does kind of reflect just real life. And a lot of the conversations that people have kind of are treading the same ground over and over again. I mean, as listeners of this podcast will know, I mention the same shit over and over again, but just with different guests this week.
Listen, let me talk about boobs for a second, because we all love boobs. And
oh yeah, it's just interesting. But I mean, going back to like the writing thing for a second, Sam, you said the writing part is like easier for you, like and you say you do plot things out. Like, do you find that process like easy to like just plot things out and it comes naturally to you, or like do you stress over it like I do?
I think it depends on the story. I know like when I'm writing a story with just words, no illustrations, I'm picturing how it's playing out in my mind, and so I kind of write it out in a lot of detail. But I don't stress too much about whether or not it's going to work on paper, because guaranteed I get to a spot in an issue where I'm just like, well, this looked good on paper, but it is so boring to draw. And it's like, I can't imagine somebody reading the comic would find that, like, if I find it boring to draw, they're probably going to find it boring to read.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't read the same way as if you're writing like a novel and stuff. So really when I'm doing my writing, I write out the story, I hit all the key points that I want to hit, all the major events, like who dies and who lives, whatever. And then when I go to work on the comic and on the issue, that's when I make my edits to the script. So like I wrote Will Not Bow years ago. Like Will Not Bow has been in the planning process for like 10 plus years. But then when I finally wrote the script, I wrote the whole script for the entire series in a month. But when I go back and I start creating a new issue, the script pretty much changes. And I've made edits just based off of drawing the comic, but also when streaming on Twitch, the community plays a big part in it as well. Like, and especially in the lore and the reasoning behind why I did some of the things that I did. Like, sometimes the community will ask questions like, well, why are there crystals? Why is this person seeing visions of this other person or whatever? And it kind of like helps me to break it down and figure out like the lore behind the story and not just the events taking place on the page, if that makes any sense. I think I'm rambling, but
oh yeah, no, I definitely get that. I'm actually falling into the other trap where I have like the Osrin kind of universe that I've created. I created the setting like before it even had a name. Like, I've been developing this setting since 2008. I think I may have mentioned this on some of the more like RPG focused session, like, podcasts that I've done. But when I started playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, the first group that I was in, I was the DM. And this was before like the big current renaissance for tabletop that we're in the midst of right now. Like, Critical Role didn't exist. Acquisitions Incorporated did exist, but they hadn't put out a single like video yet. They were just audio only podcasts. And so like I didn't know much about like D&D before I started playing it either. Like, all I knew about it was that my parents thought it was a gateway to Satanism and they wouldn't let me play it in high school. And I was like, but it's just improv acting, right? And I like to act. And so
it's like, do you not watch movies or TV
Right.
shows? Like, it's
Yeah.
essentially the same thing.
Yeah, and so like I didn't know anything about it, and all I had was like 2 acquisitions, like live play audio podcasts, and like the blogs that I could find online. I didn't know Forgotten Realms was a setting. I didn't know about Greyhawk or Eberron or any of that stuff. And the Dungeon Master's Guide was like, hey, this is how you create your own world. And I was like, oh, that's so okay, I create the setting. And so like I've been working on this setting for, well, what, 13 years now, I think, if my math's correct. 13 years.
We're artists, we
And
don't do math.
I know, right? And it's like I have so much like built-in lore, right, to the setting that when I finished the first draft of the graphic novel, which is also the medieval fantasy setting itself. I had this like half an issue was caught up with the cleric finally talking to her deity for the first time, like actually, like not just like praying for her spells to be restored or whatever, and like, yeah, okay, cool, my spells are restored, so I have a quote unquote connection with the deity. But like, no, like legitimately, like avatar appearing in front of like them and having like an actual conversation. And the majority of that conversation was me just explaining like the mechanics of the multiverse, and like the lore of that. And like almost ubiquitously, I think it was like one beta reader that was like, oh, I thought that was kind of interesting. But everybody else was like, why are we reading this? This sounds like a school lecture and I'm bored, and it doesn't seem like it plays into anything that's going on. It just makes it sound like the god is like making excuses for like the troubles in this character's life. Like, what's going on? So like I've had to actually pare back the lore instead of like wanting people, or instead of making people want more of it. I've like had people like, shut up already, no one cares. Yeah, it's just it's an interesting thing. Like, how do you do that balance? And I
Yeah.
guess maybe there is a benefit of sort of just, I don't know, not over editing before you get to the art. I guess where you can just sort of
Kind of
play
just
around
wing
with
it,
that
stay
naturally.
loose with it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like,
Mm,
you don't want to overthink anything. Like, anything that ends
No.
up overthought is going to be less than, I mean, you lose energy, you lose purpose, you lose
Yeah.
intent, like, you get bogged down in minutia. Like, yeah, you do want it to, be thought through and well put together, but
It needs to make sense, but
yeah, but like, you don't
Does
want
it?
it to get so bogged down. That's part of the reason I am drawn to, like, with what I do with He May Yet Conquer, is like, this world is already established, and like the stories that interest me a lot of times are like, what happens next after the big final battle or the last revelation or whatever, like, what is going to happen to these characters next, now that, like, this incredibly intense world changing time in their life is over? How do they move on from this? And it's like,
Mhm.
I could, spend 12 issues telling my own version of that story, but like, that's not the story I'm after, and I don't want to spend the time telling that story. I don't want to, in my story, spend a lot of time hinting at that story when you, the audience, have no, buy-in with it. And it's like, I don't want my story then to be about filling you in on this story. It's like, this setup was already here in these books. These events
Mhm.
already happened. I can treat them and that history as complete and told. And like, if you're interested in it, yeah, you can go read those books. But my story is about this next step. And like, that's what I want to explore and get involved with, instead of, 11 issues of info dumping to catch you up to this thing.
Right. And speaking as someone who had never read any of Burroughs' works and hadn't even, I think I've heard the name before, like talking to you about it when you were doing the art, but couldn't have named, didn't even know he was an author. Probably thought he was like Alfred Hitchcock or something, film person. But like, I can say, like, you did a really good job of, like, I wasn't lost at all in the story. Like, you did a good job of like writing it in such a way that for someone who has no background to the property at all, like, I was able to follow what was going on. Like, I was able to connect to the characters, and I didn't feel lost at any point either in like what was going on.
Good job, Nick.
It's just because I'm good. I mean, we've already talked about how good I am and how well better I am,
Yeah,
than other people at what I
that's
do.
true.
Yeah.
You are
You just
better
need
than
more
me.
praise from everybody.
Yes.
That's all I'm in it for. I'm not here to tell stories or draw pictures. I'm in here to be praised.
Yeah.
So that's why I got into comics, the most lucrative in praise of the creative industries.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not a dying medium. Not at all. No, it's
No.
flourishing. Oh boy. Yeah, so you guys currently are not um running any Kickstarter campaigns. I know this is what we were supposed to be talking about this whole time and barely talked about it at all this episode.
Oops.
But where, like, what are your we'll start with you, Sam. Like, what are your plans for the future? I know Will Not Bow's not close to being finished yet, right?
No.
What do so I think you're just starting the pencils of issue 5, right?
So yeah, like all of issue 5 is rough, or I thumbnailed it out. So,
Oh, hold
and
on.
got all the
I gotta look
pages.
at it real quick.
I got all the pages and stuff pretty much laid out and everything. And so right now I am just roughing it in before I even start the pencils, just to make sure that the panels that I thumbnailed, actually make sense and flow properly. I'm aiming to have this issue done by the beginning of the new year. So I'm hoping to have a launch in February.
Okay.
But this issue wraps up the first like major story arc, I guess, of Zara's journey. And I'm still unsure if I want to create like a trade with all 5 issues in one book,
Oh,
or
absolutely, you should. Yeah.
or if I should just like continue
Nope,
with the
trade.
single issues. Oh, okay.
Trade
Well,
trade all
Mick
the
made
way.
the decision.
Yeah.
That
Listen,
makes
like
it easy,
the
someone else
advantage of the
makes the
trade
decision
is
for
you can re-monetize everything you've already done. You don't need to create that many new assets for it, so it gives you breathing space
Mhm.
True.
to
And that's
work on the next thing.
And that's something I want to do is like when the whole story is done, I want every issue into one book with all of the like cover art, fan art, and anytime I get like people to come in and do variant covers and stuff, I want to have that all collected into one major book. But when I do that, I want to redo issue 1, because like we talked about earlier, where we look at our old artwork and it's really rough, and it's like,
Absolutely,
we didn't start out like this at all.
I would like to do like a remastered version of Hollow, and like I could see kickstarting that, but it's like, because I want to redraw and rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm mostly happy with the first issue. I'm less happy with each subsequent issue. It's not really what I wanted in the first place. I want to redo the whole thing. Or I could spend that time, doing new stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I look back on issue 1 and I'm like, I cringe. I'm like, okay, if this is everybody's first impression of the book, it's like that's rough.
Yeah.
So,
I think we all know that.
Yeah.
I always hesitate to do it, but I'm less hesitant to do it when I'm punching up. Apologies in advance, Rob Guillory. I want to have you on the podcast eventually. I love you. I love your art. But you look at the first issue of Chew to the last issue of Chew, and it's like, oh, okay, this guy, like, kind of like Jim Lee says, anytime he talks about the original, like his stuff on the X-Men back in the 90s, like I've literally heard Jim Lee like answer someone's question of like, what would you consider your style in like X-Men, in the early 90s? He's like, my style on X-Men was learning to draw. And like you can see so much growth if you go back and read Chew, of Guillory's stuff. And I bring that up because it is my favorite graphic novel of all time. Like I love that story so much. And I don't know, like I definitely sympathize and empathize with that sentiment, but like as like a creator myself and aspiring to do those same things, it's actually like heartening and like encouraging to see the artists that we look up to not being like the perfect echelons of like I don't have like whatever noun or adjective goes there, but like I don't know,
it kind of makes them more human.
Yeah. It makes it feel like you can attain the same thing if that's what you want to do, right? So kind of like Mick said, it's like you could be spending that time working on volume 2 of Will Not Bow, or moving on to another project instead of retreading the same ground that you've done. But
isn't it so awful? Like it's so terrible. You have to redo it, don't you? But you don't need to. But you have to.
It's in the back of my mind. Like I haven't set it in stone that I'm actually going to do it, because I have so many other comics I want to do, and especially with Inktober coming up and stuff, I've got a project planned for that one. But yeah, I
I mean, reboots
That first
are all
issue,
the
though.
rage, right? Like they're putting out colored versions of The Walking Dead now, so
Hmm,
who
true.
knows? Maybe Will Not Bow already is colored, but I was gonna say we could always do an ultra colored version of Will Not Bow.
Well,
Like
issue
it's
one
same
isn't.
thing.
Issue
Oh,
one isn't colored, so I mean, the revamp would be like it would be colored as well. But
there you go. So maybe there is
yeah,
more more incentive to do that as well.
aside from
Um
just the shitty art.
yeah, well, because in my honest opinion, I actually think that could be an asset, or at least something encouraging to the next
Mhm.
generation of artists.
Yeah. And I mean,
But
I think it's, yeah, issue 4, I have some redraws of the panels from issue 1, and just seeing the comparison between the two, I'm like, damn, like I learned a lot. Issue
Yeah.
1 was learning how to make comics and draw. And
Yeah.
now it's like,
right.
okay, I think I know how to make comics to an extent, at least like it seems like it. People I think are reading it. So now it's just making sure I can keep up my drawing and
Mhm.
get better.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at the very first issue I ever did, that 2016 comic that I mentioned before that's on DeviantArt. I challenge people to go find it. Um
Challenge accepted.
I look at that, right? I did that it was 2016. Then I look at what I did in 2017, which was the first issue of the Osrin Tales. I did that as part of my senior project for my BFA, and I was working on it was yeah it was I finished that up like fall 2017, like into the spring of 2018, and then I was working on issue 2 when I actually graduated in 2018. But I hadn't finished it yet, so the first issue actually became what I did for my senior project. But I even looking at that first issue in 2016 to the second issue, but the first issue of the Osrin Tales, I was like, holy shit, like I'm so much better in that issue. But then I look at what I did in like issue 3 compared to like issue 1. I was like, holy shit, I'm like so much better. And now I look at like what I did, just right now. Like I'm looking at a short story I did for this anthology that's on Kickstarter, called Highway Robbery. And that is the stretch goal that we're trying to fund right now. I'm looking at those pages compared to like the pages I did in another short story called The Cattle Drive. And I'm like, did I literally like level up again within just like a couple of months? Because I'm looking at these pictures for The Cattle Drive and I'm like, man, I just do not know how to draw pants at all, or people in general. And
Just draw no
definitely
pants.
right. Yeah. Coming next fall, Osrin West, the Barsumian edition. all no pants allowed. Come for the boobs.
Yep.
But yeah, it's wild to see kind of just like how much we evolve and grow as artists in such a short amount of time.
For
Like,
sure.
man, much love on my part to Walter Osley and Ethan Brereton. Those guys used to run art critiques on Twitch every Wednesday, and they basically taught me how to do comics that like quote unquote properly. Obviously there's lots of rules that you can break and do it your own way, but like simple things like having the action move left to right because it subconsciously makes you feel like you're moving forward in time instead of backwards. Like let me rephrase that. Having the action move the same way that you read the language that it's written in
Ooh, that's a
has
good one.
you like, because obviously for things that are written in languages that are read right to left, you want your art to move right to left, because that's the thing that, like, if that's your basis of understanding language and moving through time from start to finish, that's how you want the art to move as well. And that was something like was like honestly kind of frustrating for me. And I did one of those things that like I learned in school, which was, even if it may be the quote unquote wrong decision, you kind of have to like listen to your own creative like voice at certain times. Like I have this one panel, this I guess 3 panels in issue 1 of the Osrin Tales, where the human warrior Milos is running away from a fight and back towards where he came from. That I didn't really set that up properly for people to know the spatial relations of where things are. So that was kind of confusing, but he's actually running from right to left. And the reason I did that was he's like running, and the gnome character Fonkin is like standing on the stoop of the magic shop after having just purchased some supplies. And you see like the hand of Milos in that panel. And then the next panel, you see most of Milos's body running past Fonkin, right? And then the last panel, you see like Milos's like the tail end of his cape, like one of his feet, and his other hand, which is grabbed Fonkin by the neck, like the collar of his shirt, is like taking him off his feet. He's like getting yanked, and it works really well because Milos is one figure just split up across 3 panels. But one of the things that I got in like that was when I learned about that rule, is Ethan and Walter were like, well, you should be doing it the other way. You should be drawing him running to the towards the right. And I was like, yeah, but then you don't get the visual joke of him yanking Fonkin off his feet. And so I kept that in there for the visual gag, but like that like lesson was like, kind of really drilled into me. So yeah, I mean, it's something like I've told other people too, who are just like, yeah, I want to draw a comic, but like I don't know how, and like I need to figure out how to do it before I do like start that. I'm like, no, you just start
do it.
You just start it.
Yeah.
There's like woefully too few resources out there about how to do sequential art properly,
because there's
like,
no right or wrong way necessarily. It's like there,
yeah,
like you said, there are like rules and stuff, but you can some of
they're
those
more
rules
like
you can break.
guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like, I don't know. I actually, if she listens to this podcast, I think she'll know that I'm talking about her. But there is someone who has said that to me recently, who I'm definitely going to try and get to do a short story for issue 2 of Osram West. She's like, yeah, I want to try it, but I'm too afraid. I don't know how to do it. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to give you money and then you're going to do it. And I'm not going to give you a choice.
No pressure.
Like, oh man. So yeah, Mick, one last question for you, because we are running short on time here. What's your next sort of big project that you're going to work on, if you have one?
I
Yeah.
Now that I'm done with the deck, my next big project will be the follow-up to He May Yet Conquer, which, because it's not a walk and talk, I am doing a little more prep work on than is usual for me. And most of that's just because I haven't had time to sit down and draw. So like,
right.
I've just been going over it in my head. So now that I have time to sit down and draw, who knows what's going to happen.
You're building a deck. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah. I do have another big project coming up that I can't talk about yet, but like literally the most exciting thing in my career.
So you're drawing Batman. Confirmed.
It's going to be amazing. I will stab you in the fucking neck.
We like to have fun around the office.
But like,
you're telling me, I know
soon.
how you feel about Batman, but you're telling me that if you had a chance to work for DC, and they were like, "We want you to draw Batman. Can only you, Mick. Only you can draw this particular Batman story. You're gonna pass that up. You're gonna pass up that
You know,
opportunity."
honestly, 2 years ago, I'm like, absolutely not. I will draw whatever like bullshit they want me to. But like my desire to work for DC at this point, like I don't like, because at first I thought like I want to write, like I would want to be able to do like, you know, my own Ultimate Universe version of Superman where it exists outside continuity. I can create whatever story I want from the ground up. But like if it's popular, it's only, you know, one dumb crossover away from being just as meaningless as everything else.
Right.
And like after having done 2 Kickstarters and done a story through SourcePoint, like I do not feel the desire to work for them anymore. Like I don't need to put up with those headaches or, you know, miss out on, like I don't need to work for a page rate when I can do whatever the fuck I want on Kickstarter and you know, enjoy it more. Like
I mean, do something you're more passionate about and not just for a
right. Like I feel like, okay, you know, people do talk about like comics are dying medium, and I think like DC and Marvel are dying companies because they spent so long, you know, focusing on such a small portion of the consumer base,
what it means to make comic.
Yeah, and it's like you go on Kickstarter and it's like comics do better year after year because I don't need, like I only had 140 some backers on He May Yet Conquer, and I made $4,000. Like I'm going to have made, you know, just under $3,000 profit by the time I pay and ship for everything. And on Hollow, which sold a lot more copies through SourcePoint, I made less than $1,000 altogether. Like,
right.
I mean, with Kickstarter, I can do whatever I want for the audience I want and be more successful at it. And I don't need to worry about, you know, whatever clever idea I come up with for this character that happens to come from the planet Krypton being, you know, 100% co-opted by whoever, whatever corporate overlords, you know, for whatever the next crossover is. Like there's no,
I mean, that's true. I mean, you look at what Sean Murphy's, you know, White Knight,
like White Knight, and like part of his White Knight thing, his deal there is that like they won't, like his universe remains separate, and it's like 100% believe DC will honor that contract up until Warner Brothers decides there's more money in not honoring that contract. Tells DC, well then what the fuck?
Well, they already didn't honor it because originally it was supposed to be a one-off. Like it was just supposed to be the White Knight.
Well, right, but like
there's a sequel book.
Right, but like it's all under his control. Like the sequel book only happened because he wanted it to happen. You know, like and like his deal with doing that sequel book was the like, yeah, but like Batman White Knight can't show up in any of your other events, or he's not doing any of this multiverse stuff. Like he is completely separate. That's how DC got him to agree to do more books. And like he's talked about, like he has a universe and a story in mind. And it's like, I do believe DC will honor that until Warner Brothers decides to tell them not to. And so like, there's no, like, I don't know. It's just, I never thought I would have gotten to this point where it was like, I would voluntarily pass up work for DC. But I have like, again, like I have an opportunity coming up that is like, it would be the most exciting thing I've worked on. You know, like I will be working for someone else. It is not a project I ever thought I would do, but like,
do we know this person?
Could not be more excited about it. I don't know. You might.
Todd McFarlane.
Yes, Todd McFarlane.
You're retelling it's Hollow, but with Spawn.
Exactly. He is a name in indie comics, but I don't know like how widely known he is. Because I don't actually read a lot of comics. anymore. I read my Kickstarter books occasionally, and like that's it.
I think it's
but like,
really interesting though to hear your like updated views on that, because I
Yeah.
still have this idea that like I know that conversion from one audience to another is like really low, but like I think back to like, you know, Greg Capullo, and like I knew about his stuff with Spawn, but like I never really read Spawn, and like I didn't become a fan of Capullo's until I started reading the New 52 Batman stuff with Scott Snyder as writing this stuff. And then when I heard about Capullo doing the Reborn for Image, I think he did that with Mark Millar.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm on board for this. Like, I don't care what the story is. I don't care if it's terrible. Like, I love Capullo's, artwork. So I'm in. I'm on board. And it's like I always have like in the back of my mind of like, even if like it's not like the best story or like the thing that I like really would want to do creatively at that moment in time, like I think I would find it really hard to pass up an opportunity to work for DC or even Marvel. And regular listeners of my stream or my Patreon posts or this show know like I respect Marvel, but I'm not a fan. But I would still, at a drop of a hat, work for them, even with the horror stories that I've heard. From people who have worked for them, because in my brain it's like, well, someone's probably going to read that story, and someone's probably going to like the stuff that I do on it, and then they may
transfer over to yours.
Yeah, it may transfer over. Plus, being able to put that on like your Kickstarter and stuff as well, being like,
yeah, right. Like it would help with that. I mean, that is
from Ed DC, artist on this comic from DC and this comic from Marvel comes Osram
right, like
Tales Volume 17 or whatever.
If anything would convince me to work for DC, it would be more of that kind of thing where it's like, I can use this to sell my next thing a little bit more effectively instead of like, I worked on like, I was so happy to work on Batman. But like, hey, listen, I worked on Batman, so buy my other shit.
Right,
like,
right.
That is why I worked on Batman, so that you would buy this thing instead.
For me personally, I don't think I would want to work on any specific, like any full length book, but I wouldn't mind working with them on covers and variant covers and stuff, like whether it's DC or Marvel. But one company I would literally drop everything for is Aspen Comics.
Oh yeah.
Like, I would drop literally everything for as long as they needed me for.
I'm an Archie stan through and through. I just want to draw Jughead. That's all I want to do. And put like little Folsham art, like branded pins all over his crown cap.
That'd be awesome.
Actually, scratch that. I want to work for Mad Magazine. Can I? Can we resurrect that?
Say like it seemed like you could have a Mad style.
Can we bring that back? I think that's dead right now. But I'm on the same page of like I don't want to work on like an ongoing thing. I have 2 Batman stories just in the back of my head, one of which I am fully willing to tell the world because it's kind of like a meh, whatever. I think it would be hilarious, like if you use if you use D&D style like rules for this stuff about how like wizards just study a lot and figure out like puzzles and things like to use magic. I'm like, Riddler seems like he could be a wizard. I'm just saying. Riddler seems like out of anyone, he could probably figure out how to do magic, and it'd be really hilarious to see like the Riddler turn like this like sewers or like a warehouse or something into like a D&D style dungeon full of like black magic, and have Batman like have to like get the Bat family together and basically do like what if D&D but Batman, because
go on a dungeon crawl together.
Yeah, I think that'd be like really funny, just as a one-off like stupid kind of like thing, because I just think it would be hilarious. Like I like the Riddler a lot. The other story is very personal to me, and I think it's actually like a really good idea, so I actually don't like telling people about it in case, it gets back to DC and they do it without me. But I think if done right, that could be the saddest like Batman story ever written. Just like not a dry eye in the house, just completely emotionally destroy everybody who reads it. Like the most depressing thing ever, and I think it would be amazing. Like, but
I am actually gonna need to head out in like 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say we're coming up to the end here. We normally do viewer questions at the end here, but I've run out of viewer questions. So to everybody listening, you can head over to patreon.com/Folsham_art, and for just $1 a month, you get a ton of cool stuff, but you also get access to our Patreon only members section on the Discord, and there is a area there where you can submit questions to be answered here on Thought Balloons at the end of the show. There is a public question area now as well in the Discord that I will default to if we don't have Patreon questions, but those do get preference for the show. But in lieu of not having any questions this week, we have run the gamut from what are some important things you think people should know to enter your career field, all the way up to what's the best sandwich. I guess I'll just ask you guys, do you have any parting like words of wisdom for our listeners?
Just make
Sell.
comics.
Fair enough. Sam, let them know where they can find you around the internet, and we'll make sure to put the links in the description as well for people.
I'm everywhere. You open up web browser, I'm there. No, I'm just kidding.
Cool.
So you can find me on Twitch. I stream 3 times a day, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, from 2 p.m. Atlantic Daylight Time to 5. And I am also on Instagram at just Samantha.Branch, as well as Twitter. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Check out Will Not Bow on Kickstarter as well. Make sure that you guys keep a lookout for that next issue early next year. And Mick, where can they find you?
I am McComicker everywhere. MCCOMICKER on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Maybe DeviantArt. I don't know if my actual DeviantArt account is still up. Or like I have no idea when the last time I updated it was. But McComicker everywhere. And I need to do some shipping this week, but after that I should be back to drawing on stream more.
You better be.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Good places to chill out and hang out with 2 great artists. Go check them out on Twitch. Speaking of Twitch, I also stream on Twitch starting well, by the time this podcast comes out, I probably will have already started my noir graphic novel that I'm doing for the rest of this year. But you guys can check out the Kickstarter at kickstarter.com/projects/Folsham West. At the time of this recording, which is on a Monday, this doesn't come out until Friday. Hopefully we'll have broken $2,000 by the time listeners are hearing this. Who knows? Right now we're like $18 away or something like that. So
heck yeah, get those pledges in.
Yeah, to unlock Highway Robbery, the short story that I did as a bonus, we need to get to $2,300, and Mick is doing a story for us as well if we can get to $2,800. So by when this comes out, there will only be a week left. So anybody listening to this before October 1st, you still have time to make Mick do more work for me. Thanks for listening, everybody. thank you both so much for being here. I had a blast recording this podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see all of you lovely listeners next time.